Here are 3 creepy ghost stories from a Reddit user named Silver Syndicate. I'm a paranormal investigator as a hobby. Been doing it for years and I'm in love with the science behind it. However, I'm also hardened skeptic and will do everything in my power to explain what may be happening in a logical way. I've seen a lot that I can't explain, but mostly little things that don't bother me. However, there have been a couple that have legitimately frightened me. I was out investigating an abandoned motel in the middle of the night, in the middle of the desert. It's just a random place that we found. No claims, no story behind it, just a random building about a 2-hour drive from civilization. There were about 5 of us there, and we spent a good bit of time inside. When you walk in, it was very obvious that people have been living there at one point, with food containers and trash nearly covering the floors. When exploring abandoned places like this, I am always armed. Ghosts can't hurt you. However, people and animals can. And often, people are more frightening. After making sure the location was clear, I felt comfortable enough to go into the basement of the structure alone. It was a very old, crumbling basement with shelves lining in it. And I had to be careful on the stairs because they were all but falling apart. I sat myself down on the floor, turned off my light, fired up my recorder, and began asking some basic questions. I was there for a good half an hour before I gave up. Nothing was happening, and I wanted to go back to the others. When I stood up, I suddenly began hearing rustling from the opposite corner of the basement, behind the shelves. I turned around and pointed my flashlight over there, but couldn't see anything as it continued. I reached down and grabbed a stone, throwing it into the corner to see if it was an animal. However, it didn't stop. At that point, I drew my firearm from my side and called out, letting whatever it was know that I was armed and that they needed to come out. Still, nothing changed. I got a call on my radio from my buddy asking where I was. I told him I was in the basement and told him what was happening, so he knew to head over to me. At that point, I backed up to the stairs, and once I reached them, the noise stopped completely. It was dead silent. I looked at the corner for a bit longer, seeing if anything would move before I turned and went to walk up the stairs. And that's when it happened. Large, heavy footsteps came from behind me, moving quickly, and were on top of me. Within an instant, I jumped and bolted up the stairs, racing to the top before turning around and pointing my gun back down with my flashlight. I knew that was a person. It just had to be. But there was absolutely nothing at the bottom of the stairs, and everything was silent again. I ended up going back to the car and needing a moment after that. I was shaken up so bad, and to this day, I have no idea what in the hell tried to jump me down there in that basement, because my friend went down there right after and told me it was completely empty. Number 2. I believe most of the mainstream ghost hunting stuff out there is complete bullshit. Granted, there's some good groups mixed in. However, I worked with Ghost Adventures and Vincent Lords, and both are hacks. I honestly not afraid to say it. They're assholes who fake evidence for fame, and I don't condone that stupid shit. Anyway, whenever I'm investigating, I'm not only a skeptic, but I also provoke whatever may be there. I'm honestly not afraid of it at all. I played with Ouija boards, done rituals, worn satanic symbols, and read satanic scripts. I'll even full on offer my buddy up to entities. Nothing has ever happened to me when I do it. Not exactly sure, but every time something crazy happens, it's always random. I was maybe 10 or so when I had my first encounter with something I'm comfortably saying was not human. I was being picked up from my grandma's house after my father got off work, and was getting my things and putting them in a car at the time. My grandmother was letting a friend live there by the name of Shane, as he was pressed for money. I got in the car, got comfortable, and watched out the window as my grandmother and my father were talking in the doorway. After about a minute of talking, I noticed someone standing behind my grandmother in the reflection of the storm door glass. I assumed it was Shane, and he may have come in through the garage without me noticing. However, the more I looked, the more he looked wrong. He was practically looming over my grandmother. His arms seemed longer than they should have been. He was thinner than I remembered. His skin looked sickly. But worst of all, when he looked over at me, I swear to God, where his eyes should have been, there was nothing there. It was like looking down into a smooth, dark holes, and I couldn't see the bottom. I even blinked a few times, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me, but it didn't change. He was still looking at me without eyes to be able to see in the first place. After my father and my grandmother were done talking, I saw Shane walk back into the house. As my grandmother followed and my father came back into the car, as he was getting in, my grandmother came back out to hand me a toy I'd forgotten. I was still trying to rationalize what I've seen, but thanked her, and my father thanked her too. At that moment, my father said goodbye again and told my grandma to tell Shane he said hi. My grandmother looked confused and said that Shane wasn't home, that he wasn't going to get home until late that night because he was at work. My dad looked confused as well at that point and said something along the lines of, huh? I thought I seen him walking downstairs. Well, anyways, take care. And the matter was closed. I saw something in that door. My father saw something downstairs. However, my grandmother saw nothing and was home alone. To this day, I have no idea what in the hell I saw. As a kid, I didn't know what to think of it. But now that I'm older, it genuinely freaks me out because I remember that whatever it was, it didn't look right. Not only did I see something, but my father was there and he saw something too. So it couldn't have been my imagination. Story number 3 by Worthless Ruin. When I was maybe 13 or 14, my brother and I were both hanging out separately outside. He was playing basketball in the driveway. I was running back and forth on the trail in the forest behind our house, listening to music. I had on these huge bright red skull candy headphones. After a while, I got bored and went inside and up to my room. Maybe an hour later, my brother burst into my room sobbing and screaming, "What the fuck is wrong with you? You scared me to death." And I was like, what the fuck is your problem, obviously? I didn't know what he was talking about. Turns out, he hadn't noticed me go inside. Or maybe thought I went in for something and then back out. He saw me run down the path. He could see my red headphones through the bare branches. Then I didn't come back. I grew up in the forest. My family owns hundreds of acres stretching back for a mile or two. The main trail's an old logging road that goes only part of the way back before it becomes overgrown. And when we were little, the end of what we maintained was kind of a boundary set by our parents for us, so we didn't get lost, but could still be trusted to go into the woods and play alone. He expected me to turn back at this point and run back up like I had been doing, because otherwise I would have been fighting through the undergrowth to run any further. I didn't come back though. He started to get worried, or at the very least curious. It was winter and he was worried I tripped and twisted an ankle or something. I'm accident prone and it was icy in some places. He started to walk down the trail and way up ahead. He can see not really, but the red of my headphones moving through the trees, he follows. He reaches the overgrown part and can't see me anymore. He was always afraid to go further in the woods than that point alone. He waited for me to turn back for 20 minutes, gets a real bad feeling, goes inside only to be told by my mom I had been inside for a while. He thought I had been messing with him and left the trail and doubled back through the woods to the backyard. I asked him about this every few years to see if he remembers it differently or was fucking with me. He has always maintained the exact same story. I know he wasn't playing a prank. My brother doesn't fake cry, and his face was beet red and tear streaked. He was terrified and shaken from both anger and fear. I don't think he faked any of this. The only explanation could have been someone hunting out of season. We did get trespassers all the time, never that close to the house. This person would have to walk up the path far past the point where they could see the houses and knew to turn back at this point. My brother saw them first headed back into the woods. One side of the woods And our house is bordered by power lines, which is where they park and enter the woods deep enough we can't see them from the house. If the person were lost, you could see through the trees even at the other side of the house at that trail where the power lines are. The sky is open. The light is brighter. You can see it through the trees from a distance. I used to get my bearings when I got turned around exploring all the time. There was no reason for anyone to come that close to our house, even if it was a hunter. I'm also 5 feet tall and was a couple inches shorter than. It is a very particular height that my headphones would have been. A skinny, short teenage girl does not have the silhouette of a hunter, and my brother knows what I look like from a distance. Still weirds me out. He felt like he was being lured out there by someone, something that intended him harm. Those are the stories for today. Tell me what you think. If you want more stories, let us know. If you got your own personal story, post it in the comments. Let's use some of them stories. This is HeightzD. Let's get it.